And here we go. Welcome to episode 93 of the Redacted Culture Cast. Today we're going to be digging into the world of optics. As the audience, or as my guest is listening, I'm sure you might have a chuckle as you're like, oh, we're talking one way. Boom, the character comes on. I promise you, this is not a persona. I'm just trying to be real. But today, as usual, guests get to introduce themselves. So would you fire away?
Absolutely. I'm Ahmad. I'm the CEO of Lead and Steel. We're an optics, small arms, and nylon manufacturer in Central Ohio, and I'm happy to be here.
So where do people find you on the social media, and where do you interact the most?
Yeah, great question. Social media, we're on most of your big platforms. So we do have an Instagram account that's just Lead Steel, like the metals. Our website is leadandsteel.com. Our Reddit page, which is usually where I put most of my input in when guys from our community want to reach out to me directly. They usually go to Reddit. We have a subreddit called Lead and Steel, and we, obviously post regularly with some of the developing projects. Most oftentimes, polling the community to see what people want, what they want to see, and what feedback they have for some of the current designs and optical architecture that we have out there. So we're on Facebook as well. Obviously, like I said, we have the site. And if you want to see some of our projects upcoming, hopefully you enjoy the podcast, please consider adding your email to our email list. It's one of the best ways that we can communicate with our community here. We don't spam. If we're going to be sending you something to your inbox, it's usually because it's either a good deal or a new product launch or something like that. So that's it. That's who we are, and that's how you can find us.
Yeah, it's interesting being on both sides of like an email list. When you're the person trying to put people, when you're the person with the email address that's like, oh, I got to go through my spam filter every day and clear everything out. You have one perspective, but when you're on the other side, it's like trying having somebody join your email list is like, okay, I actually know that I can get a hold of you now. It's
Yeah.
kind of like it's not like having your phone number. It's not like having your phone number where it's like I have private information about somebody, but it's
Mhm.
definitely like it gives that sense of security in this in the world of social media where it's like at any given time the dictators feel like they can turn you off, and it's just kind of weird that way.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of redundancy there. So
Yeah, but it's also like oddly enough, so I enjoy writing letters, like handwritten letters. It's one of the things that we do here. People can there's places where we post an address that you can send mail to, and then I like to go back and forth.
yeah,
And so like while letters can be the most like tangible, emails do actually come in closer than just being like a follower on social media. And so having connection, it's just an odd thing that we're going to look at back in time, because there was a time where like email was like the least caring or least personal connection, and now it's just one step closer.
yeah,
We'll see. Hmm. So you guys, so lead and steel is a. You said you're a. I know you from your optics. I've seen your optics popping up around a little bit, and I've taken some interest in what I would describe as sort of this new wave of smaller manufacturers coming
yeah,
through. When I say smaller manufacturers, I'm not talking about dudes just in their garage. I'm talking about guys who've built that are kind of bringing some new ideas, new blood to the table. Whether it's companies like we had Villain Weapon Systems on a while ago, or people even to some extent like Flux Defense
yeah,
and Fluxorator. Uh, what I've noticed is that, or what I enjoy it. Let me put it this way: I enjoy it, and sometimes the industry reacts to people, especially its innovation or what it calls innovation, with negativity. And I think that some of that is it comes and goes in waves.
yeah. Certainly, I agree. Totally depends on the hype that's built up and whether or not their favorite influencers talking about it or whatever. But yeah, the industry is a funny place, man. I can kind of get into some of the experience that we've had as we've begun to release products out into the
Well,
void, if you will.
so let's start with this one. Give the story on Lead and Steel and how you guys came to be, and where you were the founding member as well. I'm assuming. So how did this like? I'm coming from a military background. Dude gets out of the military, tries to figure out how to make a company, and then like going into optics feels like a daunting task. Like there's no way I could do that. I don't have billions of dollars in capital to compete with X company. But instead, like how did that get started for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. It's a lot to think back on and reiterate here. I started Lead and Steel about 4 years ago. Started the company in my basement, and just tried my hand at reselling some small accessories on like Amazon. Um, little component manufacturing, just blanket resale of stuff that would fit within Amazon's terms of service, and see if I can make a quick buck or two. Realistically, it was just a little side hustle that I put together with my old business partner. It was while he was advising me on, how to get into law school, and he himself being a patent attorney, helping me kind of pave the way for myself from a legal perspective. And as I began, my first foray into Ohio State's law program, and it was daunting at first because it's like, hey, I don't have time to delegate to this little side hustle. But what became apparent is that upon discovery of the wonderful Reddit community called Gun Deals, there was a group of like-minded folks who wanted to see some sort of resurgence of third-party resellers who were more connected with the community, and were able to provide a product that maybe not the cheapest price out there, but at the very least with excellent customer service and follow up. And so that was something that I really cared about because I had spent some time in sales and retail, and I just liked helping people. And before law, I was trying to get into medicine for that very reason. And ultimately decided on law. But that general philosophy is what got me into creating Lead and Steel. And ultimately, what happened was, and I'm very thankful for this, that community helped build us up to what we are today. We did blanket third-party resale. We had a little online e-commerce site. It wasn't a firearms operation. It was simply, like I said, just operating it out of my business. At one point, I put on my first cousin to help us, and he's still here. He's my customer service manager behind me, typing away, responding to customer emails and requests and stuff. And we just sat there packaging little things like vice blocks and AccuWedges and spring kits and crap like that into USPS priority mailers and just getting them out the door. And we did that enough to pave the way for our own projects. For me personally, it wasn't enough for me to just be like, hey, I want to continue to resell other people's brands. It was, a bit of a pipe dream, but it was more of a long-term vision. Like, hey, it'd be nice to come out with my own stuff one day, and we got a bit of a head start on that when we realized that getting into optics resale was something that was expensive, high risk, and had pretty minimal margins. The high risk is an aspect of the product itself, whether or not that particular community of folks that you sell to would buy it or be interested in it, and that would take some know-how from your perspective as to what you think a good product is with your own independent testing and your own time in the shooting industry. And effectively, we just continued to risk it for the biscuit, bringing products to market from some of these third-party like optics manufacturers and other accessory manufacturers. And we did so, knowing full well that the margins were very tight. At times I'd be purchasing optics for like one particular SKU I remember was like $212 a unit or something, and minimum advertised price, or MAP, which is what the seller tells you can't sell below this particular dollar amount. MAP, which is what everyone was selling at, was like $250. And so when you play with the numbers, you factor in your operating expenses, you factor in credit card fees and freight and all that stuff, you don't really end up making much money. And it's a slog, and that's what third-party resale is in this industry in general. There's not a lot of meat on the bones for guys like your mom and pop shops and stuff like that, and it's pretty, it's unfortunate. But the goal was to keep operating expenses as minimal as possible. We only had one guy on payroll at that point, and continue to do third-party resale until we generated enough liquidity for our own projects. And so it took a significant amount of research, and initially all of our capital. We really bet the farm on it. But as a result, thankfully, here we are with our own optics line, and we're continuing to plow away at it. And thankfully, we haven't taken any external funding, so we're entirely self-funded. The first project, which was not to come off as like a greasy salesman, is our LP-1. Right, this is our rifle red dot. This was about 2 years R&D. We took that long to perfect this thing as reasonably well as we could, because we were working on obviously a limited budget, both marketing as well as R&D and engineering. And all of the engineering fundamentals that we had were purely just out of school. Like my personal background in undergrad, I went to school for neuroscience, but I had significant amount of physics and PChem, OChem, and biochem as well. And so we had a little bit of like material science there. And my younger brother, who's currently a mechanical engineer at GM, he's an auto designer, brilliant guy, was also still in school at the time. And so a lot of it was really just practicing theory, trying to get it out, and leveraging some buddies in academic institutions to try to get us what we want to have. And finally, after everything was all on paper, we decided to reach out to a contract engineer that we knew, a gentleman by the name of Drew Garner, who is a mechanical engineer with a master's in industrial design, as well as a Green Beret, recently retired from Fifth Group. Brilliant man, definitely very needle in the haystack kind of guy. And he took our ideas, our drawings, the things that we had, the concepts that we spent time doing some finite element analysis on, and helped us put it together, and obviously bring his own expertise as well. And so once we had that design, we could then begin to solicit some subcontract component manufacturing for our own assembly. And it took trial and error. It took a lot of destructive testing on our part. And it felt like we were going to operate in the red at one point. And thankfully, with the feedback of the community, with our individual feedback and our capabilities to, do some small time manufacturing or small batch manufacturing, we launched in October of last year, our first branded product, which is our LP-1, and it sold out in like 60 seconds. And thankfully, we've had nothing but excellent feedback from our community as a result of the product launch, and it's been great since then. It's difficult because, like I said, we haven't taken any external funding, and so now we have a larger operation with several guys on the team, both remote as well as in person at our warehouse. And so, myself, I'm not formally educated in the world of business, right? I was just a hustler as a kid growing up, and so I know how to flip shit. That's pretty much it, right? And so when I got into formal aspects of business, I learned some of this stuff through law school, through my big law internships and stuff like that. And so a lot of it wasn't really, formally implemented, in person. It was all just kind of, rough, squishy concepts and ideas. So like I can tell you about, force majeure clauses in a contract, but I can't really describe what CRM software is, right? For example, or give you particular CFO objectives from a CPA that wants to be a part of our finance team, right? It's realistically, for me as a CEO, I'm beginning to learn all of these things alongside the legal realm, of course. And so it was extremely helpful to have some of the talent that we currently have on board to come in and help us pave the way as a startup. And so I'm thankful for all those guys. Especially guys like my younger brother, Drew, the team that we have, my operations director, as well as my sales director, Garrett, who's a brilliant guy, helping us kind of get there. And everyone's pretty much got the same vision for us, which is like, let's push this forward and let's kick the industry in the dick, and show everyone why they're our optic competitors are asking too much and not delivering on enough, and all that other stuff. And so that's really what it was. As we began to disrupt the industry, we began to leak out some of our trade secrets, some of the industry trade secrets, to show people why they're being had by some of the things that they're purchasing or that they recommend, without obviously name dropping competitors or anything like that. We just showed people what the industry standards are and what it really looks like for an optics manufacturer to say, hey, we're making this particular product, and just trying to do our best to unwind all the trimming off all the fat really of the industry, to show people like, hey, listen, this is realistically, this is what it's like to bring products to market. It's not just innovating once and resting on your laurels for like 30 years. Here in this industry, we have generational nepotism, realistically, and it's been that way for a long time. It's like a near conglomerate monopoly. A lot of these optics manufacturers work together on things, and it's like, that shouldn't be the case. We should penetrate this market, and we should add some healthy competition here. And so thankfully, we're a small team, but we're a very talented team. And I am more than humbled and appreciative of everyone that's on board, from marketing to, sales to research and development and engineering. It's been a wild ride, and thankfully with uh, the successes of the LP-1 and hopefully the upcoming successes of the Pandora, we have paved the way for a huge amount of projects, which I'd love to get into today. Just a lot of them are currently just being prototyped or in concept, or currently being funded ahead of time. And it's awesome to see where it's at right now. And hopefully it doesn't slow down. It's just, like I said, going back to the aspect of being like a CEO, and being in a leadership position of a company, it's like, when do I start to pay myself? Do I pay myself now? Because this $1 could be worth $10 in 6 months if I do it right. So kind of just balancing the act of like when I should start taking some money out. But it's fun, man. It's fun, and I hope it continues, because I want people to see like what we're made of and what we can do here, and realistically how quickly it took us to get here, compared to our competitors. It's seeing who they are and seeing what they offer compared to what we have and what we can do. It gives you a little bit of wind beneath your wings. So that's Lead and Steel, a long rant of who we are as a company, where I am right now, and where we are right now. I hope that didn't bore your guys to death, but
No, monologue complete, right? That's it's. So I have to take notes on all this, and there's all these different ideas that are going on when you give a story like that, because where I live and in the field that I live in, as far as so much of the gun industry, is listening to things that are not quite at the level of grand narratives, but it's more like statements made that end up being metaphysical claims, and not even sometimes metaphysical claims, sometimes just like the state of the world, right? And one of the examples that you said was, you're talking about the optics side. This is a microcosm of a microcosm, right? We're not even talking about grand economics here. We're talking about a microcosm of the gun culture or the gun industry, and then inside that another microcosm, which is just optics, and how you were talking about nepotism and kind of working to all these issues. And the question that I would want to bring up to you is, a common perspective, and this is that comes across in the form of a feeling, which is always a little dangerous, is that, well, when anyone ever says monopoly, the assumption is that it's an impenetrable monopoly of sorts. And in some ways, I hear people refer to things as being like the big tech monopoly, right? Is like, well, big tech is a monopoly. We're hosting a show on a platform that has to deal with terms of service and gray areas for sure in regards to what can be said and what can't be said. For example, YouTube says election denial is off the table today, but tomorrow you can talk about it. And then there's this politicking that goes on in the background where people start talking about, well, what's the strategy? And so for me, I had this question on you is, when did you enter into gun culture, and how has your perspective on the social structure of the industry changed?
It's a good question. Carries some depth with it. I got into guns a little later than most, right? I got into firearms around 18-ish years old. It was one of the first things I did when I turned 18. And so, much to the dismay of my parents, my background on a personal level, I'm Palestinian. And so my parents are Middle Eastern, as am I. And for them, being raised in refugee camps and being subject to ethnic cleansing has given them a different, I guess, taste of, firearms in general, and weapons in general. And so, it was a conversation that needed to be had. We are living in the United States of America. We have constitutional protections. We have our Bill of Rights. And so, why not engage in those constitutional protections? And it took a lot of, resistance, generational resistance to try to bring that into the fold realistically. And so when I first joined, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I have. So clarification.
Yeah.
Your parent were you raised in a?
I was born and raised in Ohio. Yeah.
Okay, so your parents came from a refugee situation.
Yes.
but you
Correct.
did not. Okay,
Correct. Yeah,
so
I'm as privileged as they come, as they say. So I did flip. That's
it's
all.
context. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I appreciate that. Forgive me for not clarifying. But seeing that perspective and having a little bit of that resistance initially was one thing, and seeing what the gun community was like in what 2012, 2011, right, is about the time when I um, got into guns, and seeing what it is right now. I think things have changed on a social level. Like, the conversation about firearms is no longer so diametrically opposing on the political aisle, right, or across the political aisle. I think conversations are becoming more nuanced. I think as the internet continues to flesh out what it is to be connected to other human beings on a personal level, information dissemination is becoming more efficient, and in some ways more inefficient, right? But realistically speaking, the conversation is changing from what used to be very non-technical conversations for or against firearms to maybe a little more technical, but a lot more philosophical, right? Because we've seen what we've seen some of the happenings around the world a little better now that, especially now that third world countries and regions around the world are having more and more access to things like these, to record their daily lives and their 9 to 5s. And we see what happens in different societies outside of the United States. So this idea of American exceptionalism rather, might be getting a little more eroded as we, diversify and understand that we are citizens of the same planet. And we see what things are like when, countries have access to firearms, or they don't have access to firearms, or people live under authoritarian regimes or don't. And so, the conversation has shifted. And I think that people are now, that are getting into the firearms industry will see that it is a monolith of information, with maybe, more reliable than others, sources of information, where people can kind of learn about the firearms industry and all that other stuff, and see if that's something that they want to be a part of. And so, from just in the short span of 9-10 years, I've seen a pretty big shift where it just used to be like, okay, if I subscribe to firearm ownership, I have to fit a particular persona of what a gun owner would look like, right, or act like, or prioritize in terms of values, or morals, or politics, or what have you. Now that idea is becoming a little more, like I said, nuanced, and we have individuals from all walks of life that are their common denominator is the Second Amendment, and it doesn't have to come with a particular idea or complex that needs to be subscribed to. And that's one of the reasons we market the way we market and let it steal. Although our marketing budget is razor thin, our director of marketing is a brilliant gal, and she is excellent at helping to try to convey our message to people of like, hey, this, we are lead and steel, right? We are optics, small arms, and nylon to the highest quality that you can put together, and we do it without asking you to subscribe to a particular complex and buy into a particular idea of what the brand is. It really is what you bring to it, right? And so, seeing more and more companies like that is good, I think, because it allows the firearms industry to not be exclusive to a particular set of brands or ideals or something. And it's I think that'll only help cast a wider net for constitutional protections moving forward, as well as obviously guaranteeing or enshrining these rights for us for subsequent administrations that may try to harm them. Generationally, I think that's a good thing to have more people on board. And so, for me at least, I think the conversation has shifted just in the last 10 years alone. To recap, from one that was a little more traditional, you're either pro-gun or anti-gun, and that comes with a set of norms and ideals and concepts, to something that's a little more nuanced, but requires a more in-depth conversation and is a little harder to boil down to 60-second talking points. At least I think so. So that's my perspective, but I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Do you see people within the gun culture who kind of harken back or wish for that we could go back to the days where it was you're either pro-gun or anti-gun? Or is that time past and it'll never return kind of thing?
Yeah, I haven't seen much of that yet. Granted, I don't have the best fingers on the pulse when it comes to stuff like that. I'm
Right.
very busy with product development, but at the same time, I can certainly see a resurgence of that if it isn't happening already, you know. But where are you going with that? Go ahead.
Well, because so this part of the conversation is going to be the most interesting to me.
Okay.
So I'm going to be personally greedy about this one, but so I'm interested in some contextual components. You said you're Palestinian.
Mhm.
Okay, so that comes with a certain amount of cultural baggage in the West,
Mhm.
and that baggage is in some ways that baggage is, I imagine, some of it is very legitimate and some of it is entirely manufactured.
Mhm.
So and then on top of that one, you've made some you've been talking about how you've observed the gun culture and the gun community to move away from a one color stereotype, and I don't mean that in a racial sense or an ethnic sense, but a like, you know it when you see it. Oh, that's a guy because he's wearing the thing and he does the phrase and he's got the, right. So like, so gun culture has in one sense diversified, as in we've got kind of different camps. You've got like the GBRS Vans camp, you've got the Lucas Bodkin camp, you've got the Garantham humor side, you've got the, people could say FUDs, whatever. You got, and they're not really camps. They kind of swim together in the same pools.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, while there's always going to be abrasion between the tribes, so to speak. I'm curious on how you've seen this this shift from a sort of one version culture to these different elements, and whether or not that has come how you've seen it come, actually specifically, how have you seen it done naturally to good results, and how have you seen it done unnaturally to good or negative results?
Mhm. It's a good question.
It's not an easy one, so I got to keep working it out.
Yeah, it's all good, man. um, as for the, let's call it diversification of the gun community. As for the good, I think I feel like, we have to contrast this with some of the you know growing firearms law firms, constitutional law firms, particularly. I think some of these groups like Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America. Seeing what their membership rates look like, percentages of people that are joining in relation to the NRAs, which previously was like the textbook. If you're for gun rights, you join the NRA and you're an NRA member, right? And me personally, I don't like the NRA. That's just on a personal level. That's not lead and steel, but I have my own criticisms with the National Rifle Association, and a lot of that has to do with my background, right? And so when I see some of these uh, um, more nuanced firms that come together to, say for example, fight the ATF on the brace ban, right? The talking points aren't cheap political punch points, right? They're legitimate claims of arbitrary and capricious regulations, right? And bringing pretty detailed legal claims and some constitutional law precedent that says, hey, what you guys are doing is unconstitutional, right? And stuff like that, I really like, because it allows the base of the industry, that those people that are in those particular groups, to be more educated, and as a result more capable to identify when their rights are being eroded from them. Whereas if your entire base of communication with other political groups, if you want to call them that, when it comes to guns, if that's purely anecdotal and you don't have a technical foundational understanding, you're going to be had, right? And in the conversation, and as a result, your rights, could be in jeopardy if you don't, step forward and say something. So I think from a benefit from that perspective, I think the rise of some of these industry players is a good thing. But I can jump to the bad thing. Go ahead. You wanted to say something.
Well, I'm putting a footnote on the bad thing because I need a point of clarification question. How do you, if you do, how do you, and do you make a distinction between colloquial conversation and professional conversation? You're
Distinction. Go ahead.
because you're talking about like, right, so I think of it this way. This is my example. So when people use words like logic in colloquial conversation, it means one thing. It means, don't you think it makes sense to me? That's what they're saying. Well, logically, when somebody in a colloquial conversation says, well, logically, because my background's philosophy, so if you're dealing with I mean, you're within law and philosophy, they fit together very well. There's a reason why a lot of people get a philosophy major and bachelor's and go on to a law school degree, and that just has to do with, honestly, formal logic. It's everything else is useful for terminology and becoming accurate in certain things. But what I run into with the conversation on law is it can very quickly be distinguished between, like, there's lawyer speak and then there's people speak,
Yeah,
and 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 in some ways lawyer speak needs,
it does
I
need clarification. You're right, and I apologize. There, like the legal jargon in general, the verbiage is just it's so nauseating, and unfortunately, it has impacted my own lexicon here. So,
sure, but what I value about, like, the Firearms Policy Coalition is that they, as far as my observation of some of their media, as well as other people, right? And this is where the culture and the law interact. My base political philosophy is that any sort of government is built on a foundation of solid philosophy and solid law. Law being the is of the is-ought divide, philosophy being the ought of the is-ought divide. And if you have one without the other, you either have legal tyranny or, well, philosophical tyranny. And those two things need to work in tandem with each other. And so, um, lawyers without ethics are bad people,
certainly,
right? So then in this example, the Firearms Policy Coalition or these newer law groups that are fighting and engaging within the political system and the legal system for gun rights and Second Amendment rights are doing an excellent service to the people who support them by treating them like adults and saying, this is what this means, this is how this works, as opposed to they're taking our guns and then moving on. And
Mhm.
so, like, the fear mongering of the older ways doesn't either has adapted to a newer elevation or it doesn't stick the same way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I like that a lot. Thanks for fleshing that out a bit. Yeah, I agree. I like the way you phrased that. Certainly better than the way I did. So thank you.
No, it was also a question of, like, how do you see that playing out in your world too?
Yeah. Uh, well, obviously, the biggest thing is going to be the immediate threat of individuals who are well versed in both constitutional law and the technical aspects of firearms ownership, who will, oftentimes utilize industry subject matter experts to draft legislation that's a little more watertight as compared to previous state legislation, for example. And we saw that most recently with Washington. That thing was worded so damn lethally that it's pretty difficult to have some loopholes, if you will, in trying to maintain some semblance of your constitutional protections. And so I can see it playing out, in a way that might be a little less beneficial for people who support the Second Amendment. But realistically, that's only because the other side, if you will, people who are trying to engage in anti-gun legislation, are doing so from like you said, maybe the law being very well versed and being argued in a way that can be supported by some of the case law that they bring. From an ethics perspective, they may be thinking that they're doing themselves a favor, ethically, but realistically could be flawed. Um, like you talked about. And so, it may guide the conversation in a way that, isn't necessarily helpful or beneficial to society. So I think that's going to be probably the most immediate issue that I can see from the way that, the conversations are changing from they're taking your guns to the, hey, this is why the ATF is trying to take, your rights away. So, yeah,
Or maybe, like, this is how, right? So it's always a moral pitfall to try to ascribe motive where it isn't already plainly stated.
yeah,
But I do think there's a correlation between the actions of the ATF to deal with Bryce rulings and its intended target.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. What would you? What, no. So this is going to be a personal question, but here's a way of phrasing it. Why do you think that the ATF has chosen to target a item that specifically affects AR-15 owners? Do you think there's a motive behind that is other than, well, it's an egg on our face situation, or do you think it's because they've identified the AR-15 with a certain group of people?
It's a tough question, right? Because for me, I don't know what's going on in Biden's DOJ, and I don't know what's going on in the ATF. On a more minute level.
Mm-hmm.
My conjecture here, my opinion is that what the agency is trying to accomplish, I think, is as broad sweeping gun legislation as reasonably feasible under their definition of something called Chevron deference, which you may have heard of. It's Congress's enactment that allows some of these agencies to carry the will of Congress within the bounds that Congress initially set forth with them. And so ATF may, outwardly or rather pretextually be saying that we're operating within the bounds of Chevron deference.
What do you mean by pretextually? What do you mean?
Pretextually, as in from a public, forgive me, more of the stupid lawyers speak. I'm sorry.
It's still useful though.
Yeah, certainly. So pretext is something that is pretty much like bullshit, right? Someone says something to you that's pretextual, they're bullshitting you, but on a surface level is coming off as legitimate. So
What's the part that is it the fact that what's the part that makes it bullshit? Is it that it's not true, or like,
no,
in other words?
Yeah, that's a good question. So just trying to get into that a little bit. To lay the foundation a little here. What's pretextual about it is the ATF saying that this has always been on the books. This is within the realm of Congress's initial delegation of authority to the ATF. And because we have always regulated short-barreled rifles, this currently falls under the same paradigm of regulation. And that's what's pretextual.
So they're retroactively writing what was spoken about their initial inception. So they're essentially retroactively claiming that Chevron deference includes this.
Pretty much, right?
Okay.
Basically, that, hey, Chevron deference states that we're allowed to continue to regulate these particular kinds of firearms since the inception of the NFA, for example, right? And this class of firearms operates within that umbrella of firearms, and we're doing so legally. We're not operating in an arbitrary or capricious manner. We are not stepping over the bounds of case law and constitutional precedents, being Chevron deference. And we're effectively doing as much as we can on the surface to come off as legitimate, but realistically beneath the surface, trying to ban as many firearms as reasonably feasible, under this legal protection that they can argue is what it is, without basically going door to door and saying, hey, your AR-15 is now illegal, give it to us, right? For whatever reason, we don't like the fact that you have vertical grips on your 10.5-inch rifle or whatever the heck it is. So that's what I think is going on. And that, again, that's just my take as someone who's been in the industry for 10 years, not that long, compared to some of the other, guys that have been here for a while. I've seen several administrations and have seen, several constitutional decisions on the matter. But yeah, that's what I think is going on. I think, on the surface, it's like, hey, we can do this because we're allowed to do this, and that's that. And underneath it, it's, hey, this is our opportunity to get after 40 million plus AR-15s.
So there's so my background is from 3rd Ranger Battalion. So that comes with its own kind of hilarity, and jokes can ensue. But there's a line that gets said, and it comes from the Ranger Handbook, if I remember correctly. Now I've been out for 10 years, so there's a small amount of forgiveness that's acceptable. But it's sort of like, this is a paraphrase. There shall be no hoodlums and brigands within the battalion, and if it ever does become the case, then it will disband. There's this. My Ranger Handbook is on the my Ranger Handbook's on the shelf over there, and I don't want to interrupt the show to pick it up, so I'm pulling whatever I can up on my phone. But I find it quite funny that there's kind of a similarity in this term. There shall be no hoodlums and brigands in the battalion, and if there are, it shall be, or in the regiment, and it shall be disbanded. There's the law, or the ruling made by the ATF shall not be capricious and arbitrary. It's like, it does come down to definitions at this point in time, and now we're literally in a conflict involving felonies and life sentences for otherwise, law abiding isn't the right word. For the good people of the Americas, it seems like some of their fate lies in whether or not a person's definition of arbitrary or capricious holds.
Yeah, court's definition, jury's definition,
Because
they're
if you look at the brace rule, the brace is at all, what it showed was the distinction between a 16-inch and a 14.5-inch barrel AR-15 was an arbitrary distinction, right? Like it's an arbitrary distinction. And so from a legal term versus a philosophical term, what does arbitrary mean?
Yeah. So a legal term, rather the legal definition of arbitrary is really without justification, right? Is the best way that I can describe it. You know what? I'm going to get into my Westlaw account and get the proper, maybe Black's Law Dictionary definition of this, so I don't butcher it. So, I don't get any of the gun attorneys up my ass about it. But yeah, usually it's without rhyme or reason from a legal perspective.
Yeah, because the philosophy guys are gonna crawl up my spine here pretty quickly when we start talking about justification. Because I mean, now you're talking about moral justification versus moral imperative versus positive rights versus negative rights versus infringements versus it's just, you get all these. This language is important. It's interesting that we keep coming back to it because it's like, while you're looking that up, or is it? Are you ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
Fire
okay.
away.
So, quoting City of Livingston versus Park Conservatory, it's a decision is arbitrary if it comes about seemingly at random or by chance or as a capricious and unreasonable act of will. It is capricious if it is not the product of a sudden, if it is the product, of a sudden, impulsive, and seemingly unmotivated notion or action. So basically, without real justification, kind of baseless.
Well, so you could say it's motivated. Now we have a problem, though.
Oh, now we have a separate set of motivation, obviously, but this is what the law is. Like you talked about law as like a foundation. It's important to have like a structural foundation. Unfortunately, realistically, after getting out of law school, I can now attest to the fact that law is whatever the hell the attorney wants it to be, if they're a good enough attorney. So
I mean, there's a certain amount of truth to be said there, but okay, let's take that. Let's pull that back again. Let's pull that idea back. Because sometimes we can get granular, and sometimes we got to get a little bit more grand narrative here. And so, when we're dealing with a system of law, we know that we're dealing with a system of people, and we want to have things that are solid. But then we recognize that people are not malleable necessarily in the Marxist way, but they have variations. This is the objective subjective problem.
Yeah,
especially in correlation to reality and if reality is a thing and so on and so forth. And so what is the value of a term like arbitrary or capricious if it doesn't seem to have any solid correlation to reality? And how would you address that to somebody who is trying to understand it in a way that was meaningful to not even just a legal sense, but like, how do I even interpret this in a valuable sense?
That's a little more difficult. Now that's a little more philosophical, right? Because to consider something not arbitrary or capricious, or arbitrary and capricious, you have to define the secondary characteristics of what it is that you're defining, right? The actual language that you're using. And so, if we talk about how, let's say we look at this is a Ninth Circuit Court case rather. Where the quote is a little bit submitted, but that's okay. States a decision is arbitrary and capricious if the agency, 1, has relied on factors which Congress has not intended it to consider, 2, entirely failed to consider an important aspect of the problem, 3, offered an explanation for its decision that runs counter to the evidence before the agency. I'll talk about that in a second. And 4, so implausible that it could not be ascribed to a difference in view or product of agency expertise, right? And so that's, especially with number 3, like these are usually elements or factors that's levied in what the courts consider a balancing test, right? And so when you bring a case before the court and you state that these factors weigh heavily in the defendant or the state's case, for example, right? It's balancing these factors and seeing, very subjectively before the court, where do we want to add weight to the particular argument? And if we look at, factor number 3, for example, offered an explanation for its decision that runs counter to the evidence before the agency. That's something that's totally up to what the evidence is that the agency brings, right? And if the agency says that, hey, we have data from the CIA that states that more often than not, short-barreled ARs are used in a particular kind of violent crime than longer-barreled ARs, then that could technically be evidence, but it could be misappropriated evidence because we're not, factoring in social factors and, some of the more larger picture things. We're just taking a look at a situation and trying to apply a band-aid to it, or trying to, you know, um, add into the security theater. But that may fail the balancing test here. And so, what people need to understand is that it really is dependent on the type of jurisdiction that you bring it to, the court specifically, the judge hearing the case, the attorneys that are on. And it's one of the reasons why forum selection is such a huge aspect of civil procedure. We see, some of these bigger cases going up against the ATFs. Take Lawrence DeMonico's rare breed case with his law firm or his attorney, right? A lot of it is forum selection, where oftentimes, a case will be kicked out for, improper forum as a violation of civil procedure, or be brought to a particular forum because it seems, a little more favorable for the plaintiffs or the defendants. And so it's hard to explain those things. It really is a lot of lawyers being lawyers, man, trying to navigate the system to get their way. That's really it, as crappy as that sounds. But
well, there is strategy involved, right? And so I think sometimes we stand out and we look in. I think it's useful for us to have a window to look into that one, and sometimes we have to stand on the outside and kind of, in some ways, trust and hope that those people on the inside of that fight are doing the right thing. Now, when it comes to the lawyers' game, because of the history of the NRA and what's happened recently, I think a lot of the culture is jaded in that direction, which there is a there's I can understand it without necessarily justifying it at some point in time. And that's I can understand it, and so like I can understand why people hold a certain perspective, like, oh well, the lawyers don't seem to want to do anything useful, and we're getting very 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 not granular generalized, right? I got to be careful with that one. So, but we also do that in other fields. Like this is what specialization means, is that sometimes I have to trust the mechanic, sometimes I have to trust the doctor, sometimes I have to trust the dude overseas fighting in some whatever reason, and the positive and negative sides of division of labor produce this outcome of like, well, I can't be everything at the same time.
Of course.
And so we've seen, this is going back, we're kind of going to full circle here real quickly, and we're going to go back to your larger art conversation that we had about 20 minutes ago on seeing the culture shift. And now we've talked about it from a very gun culture internal side. What about pulling away a very gun culture internal side, which is like the NRA, the FPC, GOA is a very much so like, if you know what we're talking about, you're in the culture, whereas people outside of it may not have the same perspective of those kind of things. Now I want to kind of turn it away from that to, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to end this first part of the show, and we're going to do a part 2. So let's do that, because in part 2, what I want to do is I want to start with your cultural observations, both from you as an individual with the context, and then into manufacturing as a whole, and how you've seen that, how you kind of go full circle in that one, and we'll do that in part 2. How does that sound?
Deal. Let's do it.
Cool. So, where do people find you? What are you most excited? What are you launching right now? What's coming out with you guys? And then where do we go from here? Let's do that stuff.
So come by our website, leadandsteel.com, like the materials, lead and steel. Lead Steel for Instagram, and obviously Lead and Steel for our subreddit, if you're on Reddit. We're most excited about our LP-1 right now. That's our duty grade rifle red dot. That's absolutely lit the market on fire, thankfully, with a very mental launch. And upcoming, we have our Pandora, which is our closed emitter pistol dot. It's the end all be all, hopefully closed emitter pistol dot to put on your duty weapon. And then after that, we're getting into a bit of an LCAN competitor that's here to kick Raytheon in the dick. So hopefully that's coming along with a subset of other SKUs. We have our small arms that's here. It's right around the corner, as well as our nylon. And with every aspect that we get into, we try our best to be the absolute best at it. So find us on any of those platforms and figure out what the rave's about.